Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We break down 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses. And we do this every week on Monday morning. The reason we believe is every one of us who's a caring Fort Worthian, who's going out to work, going to go do our jobs. What's a better way to get ready for the work we do than knowing what's going on in the city? So we break down a 40 to 50 minute, sometimes a little longer episode to give you the things you need to know for the week. My name is EJ Carrion, and my former co-host, who will only be here for up until June because he's moving, Jimmy Sweeney, after 130 episodes, he will be moving on, and we've been having an awesome co-host experience. Last week we had Brian Dixon and Hayden Blackburn talk about entrepreneurship and voting. We had Ann Zeta on before that, but today we have Brian Renteria, who is joining us from the pod. Welcome, my man.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Much love to everything going on. Being local is far and foremost important. Make sure that we take care of our home before we take care of everything else.
Look at that. Well, listen, man. Let's tell people who you are. Who are you? What is your Fort Worth story, and how did you get onto the podcast? Like, how we get here?
Well, my Fort Worth story actually starts before me. My family came to Fort Worth 1911. For those of you who are familiar with Southside Fort Worth, right there by the old steel mill that used to be up north of the Gran Plaza, which is, formerly the Seminary South, used to be Katy Lake. My great-grandfather was the second house up. So, my roots to Fort Worth go a little deep. And my love for Fort Worth is definitely there. One of the best communities. Had a chance to travel just enough to know what I have here and appreciate it even more so. So, yeah, Fort Worth is definitely a number one place.
Well, tell me, what do you do now? Like, what is your expertise? What is your knowledge in? I know we have you for an array of stories we're about to get into, but what is your natural expertise in state?
If I had to say expertise, my expertise is probably learning. I'll tell you that. Yeah. I'm a passionate learner. I want to continue to grow, lifelong learner. That being said, by profession in K-12 education, I'm a local Fort Worth ISD product, Texas Wesleyan product, UT Arlington, in downtown Fort Worth, Santa Fe campus product.
Come on now.
So, it's, again, Fort Worth centric, right? And so I had a chance to move from K-12 back to my home at Texas Wesleyan. So I work there at the university, supporting the development of future educators as a certification officer, support them, up-and-coming principals, superintendents, and it's a great opportunity.
Awesome. Well, you know what I love about this podcast, guys, and why I'm really excited that Brian is here. He's the only co-host that is on the guest pod that I didn't meet or didn't know until people were reaching out to be the co-host. There were several people, several resumes, several people DM me on Instagram. I would love to be the co-host of the pod. I didn't know them. Honestly, I didn't have a lot of time, and I already had close networks and ties of people who already wanted to be co-hosts. But Brian was persistent. He was consistent. And when I saw his resume and got to meet him at a coffee shop, I was like, you know what? People got to know who this guy is. And it's a perspective that I knew needed to be on the pod. So we're all fortunate to have you, man. And let's get ready to rumble.
Do appreciate it. Thanks so much. Glad to be here. Let's do this.
All righty, man. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. So the first story I want to talk about is the Maddie Parker statement. So as we are all still coping with, what happened at the Allen Outlets. Now, I guess that would be, by the time you're listening to this, 2 Saturdays ago. So we kind of brought it up in our former pod, and it still sits with us. And obviously it hit our mayor and it hit our political officials, so much that some Republicans brought a House bill up to increase the age to purchase a automatic assault rifle from 18 to 21. They were able to get it on the docket, and people got excited, including our own mayor, who in her tweet on May 8th, she said, "Today I read the heartbreaking story about the Cho family. Only 6-year-old William survived the Allen Mall mass shooting. He lost his entire family, his parents and 3-year-old brother." She said, "We have a crisis. Yes, mental health is a part of the solution, but we can't afford to just stand still waiting for longer-term investments to save lives. We need immediate action. And she said, today I'm encouraged by the step forward from Republican Sam Harless and Justin Holland and 6 other Democrats on the Texas House Community Safety Select Committee, and thanking them for letting the House Bill 2744 move out of committee. She said, I know this bill will not have prevented the Allen Mall mass shooting, but it's a start in preventing future tragedies. HB 2744 could save lives. It deserves debate from our leaders in Texas legislature. To William and the many other families and neighbors grieving, we love you, and I'm so deeply sorry. We are now at the point where we are aware that the Texas House assault weapon bill misses deadline for floor vote, and a lot of Uvalde parents were in attendance. The politicians could hear them screaming for this to make it, and unfortunately, the fight still continues with very little action on gun control. Brian, what's your take? As a father, as a educator, and also a proud Fort Worthian, like, how do you look at the way Mattie has handled this, and also, where the bill ended up going at the end of the day really didn't go anywhere?
It's a situation where, it's definitely unfortunate. So first and foremost, as we speak to this, sentiments out to the families, condolences as they continue to grow into this situation, and understand that what's happened is good to be at the forefront. And so, again, condolences to the family. As far as how it's been handled, by Mayor Parker, I think it's a situation to where obviously it's a very polarizing topic. Very quickly, it escalates to get to a point where, no one's really hearing what the other person is having to say. They want to kind of, iterate to a point where it's like, if I talk louder, then my voice is going to be heard and it's going to win someone over. So to enter in the way she did and show support for this bill to raise that age from 18 to 21, I think is a good entry point. Obviously, as she said, it's not going to have prevented anything that's happened, but it also, lets the community know that she's willing to put herself out there and maybe go against the grain a little bit from maybe what some people were expecting or where they would anticipate she would be. And so opening up that conversation and dialogue is going to be important. So I think it was a good step forward.
Yeah, this is definitely a progressive podcast, and if this podcast did have a goal, it would be to let people know that there is a progressive whole in the city, like, a community of us that is not small when you look at voter turnout. And I think when I look at the progressive community, many people dislike Mattie Parker and many people don't trust her. But I sometimes can see myself rooting for her in weird ways, and it's simply because she signals hope to me that there could be a Republican Party that has critical thinking and a brain again, where the Texas GOP currently is, or even our county, officials are worried about, pandering about drag shows and books, but completely are losing the fact of what is truly killing Texans. And I can't imagine how hard this was for Mattie. I would have liked her to be a little bit more bolder. I would have liked her to see it take it a couple steps further, but I'm not going to knock at her attempt, because I'm afraid if a moderate Republican like her, who has the voice of the middle and the center, that if I beat up on her too much, or we all do, she pulls a Glenn Whitley, and now we have to deal with a Tim O'Hara as a mayor.
No, exactly.
And so, that's kind of my battle with how to feel. Like, part of me is like, you can go further, but another part of me is like, you still did something.
So on that point, right, I think one of the words I heard you use was the idea of trust, right? And there is a lot of broken trust in our community. And yes, we do want more from her, and we do want to see that there's a lot more, growth of, understanding that reform needs to be in place, right? And so, again, it's one of those situations where the small win, the incremental win, it's not what we want to walk away with. However, if you overcorrect, you're going to find yourself yanking that wheel back the opposite direction. And if we keep bouncing back and forth, we're never going to find that middle where we need to be. And so, I say we take the small win today, have our voice, make sure that we let them know that, there needs to be more behind the development of reform. But, we take the small win and grow it.
Yeah. And I think, processing a lot, I listened to our pod last week, and I was thankful that most of the feedback I got from last week's pod wasn't about how we handled the Allen shooting, that maybe we didn't touch on it enough. I was afraid that we kind of glimpsed over it and didn't really give it its time. But a lot of it was more actually about like what the guest co-host said, because what's cool about doing this guest co-host model is that we're bringing in different political ideologies and point of views that you might not agree with some of the things the guest co-hosts are saying, and you're used to EJ and Jimmy's narrative of things. And so, but thinking about it now, and wanting to give it more nuance, we do more work to get kids' driver's license. You have to be 21 to drink. We know that even 21 doesn't do it enough, because it was a 33-year-old who did it. And, when I think about the narrative of the right of pro-life, you have to question that reality of how what you believe around guns is pro-life. Number two, if you're pro-cop or pro-fiscal budget, you also got to realize how free access to guns puts pressure on your police force and creates cost of us having to police even more.
Right.
So it's just like, the annoying thing about guns is that people think it's about freedom. And let's be clear, I am a pro gun person in the sense of, I think we should be free enough to have a gun for ourselves. And then if you're a hunter like my dad, cool and all. But that is all bigger than what we're dealing with. And if you want a gun, like, we should have to get signed off on mental health. We should have to take trainings and courses and like be okay with that.
Right.
That's really ultimately, like, if you look at all the over Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, majority of us actually believe in common sense gun laws.
Exactly.
And it's just very sad that the GOP has that much clout and deep pockets to make people afraid to think about this and realize no one's asking for us to be a gunless place. But we just got to stop this happening in our schools and now in a suburb outlet mall.
Right.
That we all know that we could have been that person. And that Cho family she was a dentist, and she went to the same dental school my wife went to.
Wow.
And was only a few years older.
Yeah.
It could have been anybody. And that is just the sad part about how now we have a bill that's not there. And now no progress again is being made.
Right. So I think one of the challenges we face, here locally and just in this whole topic itself, because obviously this goes beyond the 817, but it is, something that as local, community members we discuss. We're also looking at a challenge of saturation of community, right? There's a lot of things that we navigate and we're having to navigate as we should with these freedoms that we have here, that we're blessed with. When you start increasing the density of the population, then at that point in time, context and relevance to some of what we do changes, and we have to be mindful of those things. So then that way, when we govern and when we create these growth opportunities, then we are being responsible with that as well.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the second story, and we'll just kind of keep everyone updated on what happens. Basically, we're recording today on Friday, by the way, everyone, because it's Mother's Day, and me and Brian ain't trying to be in trouble. And so we don't know where this will be over the weekend, but it currently seems like the public didn't really go out that much. I mean, it sounds like some students in Fort Worth ISD tried to be a part of a statewide, thing, but it seems like we were even trying to limit that kind of noise.
Right. And so that's the hard part, right? Again, because of the different entry points, the different levels, and with our youth being more mindful of what our challenges are and their desire to create change and support, the development of their future, right? And, so when you have students saying, hey, we want to take a stance, and then you have, the local education agencies, that are attempting to temper and to, kind of like, yes, we acknowledge it. Yes, we think, you should have a voice. However, we also think that, you need to do it possibly on, we'll say on your own time. Right. And so, there's a thought in that, it's like, yes, they have a responsibility to be accountable to student safety during the school day, however, also, aspect of, the way funding takes place. If our students aren't in class in the building, then the local or the ISD, we'll say it that way, the ISD,
and the state's already trying to take your funding anyway,
right?
So you don't let your kids protest.
That's right, because if they're not in attendance, then they're not getting they're not getting paid, So I'll tell you this, right? Nothing ever comes down to one single aspect, right? I'm not a reductionist. I don't believe that it's one thing that drives every decision. But I think that's why it's important for us to be mindful of the different layers and context to everything. But yeah, that's our children, our youth, they definitely have a voice, and it should be developed.
Yeah, definitely. Well, moving into this second story, this is definitely a story that I think should be much more top of mind of all of us. And honestly, it was something that maybe we should have even brought up earlier, but it's about Robert Miller, who passed away in jail in a Tarrant County jail, and we've been advocating for the true story of what happened to him. His wife, Chanel Jenkins, is in court cases with the Tarrant County jail situation, and it's just crazy how weird this story has gotten, and I think all of us has to get more aware of this and be more accountable. I honestly read the Star Telegram story. I'm trying to think who wrote this, because this is one of my favorite Star Telegram stories in a long time. Abby Church and Sierra McCarthy, y'all did a great job here. So Tarrant County has amended its autopsy report for jail inmate Robert Miller to back its finding that its 2019 in-custody death was a result of over-exertion leading to a sickle cell crisis, which remains in contradiction to what outside experts told Star Telegram. So what's so crazy about this is that they said he died from sickle cell disease. Miller, 38, died after, but he was pepper sprayed 3 times in close range, and he said he could not breathe. After they a pathologist went and assessed what happened, they said that it was natural and a result of his sickle cell disease. But an autopsy report and data show that this just really can't be possible. They also really messed up here because they made it sound like the Mayo Clinic also agreed to their statement, but the Mayo Clinic actually said that that what they received wasn't enough for them to actually support the blood from Mr. Miller. And they even they did not approve of the answer that they gave, that it was sickle cell disease. But there's a specific part here that I just thought was interesting, and it's that sickle cell trait and sickle cell disease are not the same thing. People with one sickle cell gene and one normal gene have the trait, like Miller. But to be diagnosed with sickle cell disease, which is the umbrella term for a group of different blood disorders, a person must inherit 2 sickle cell traits. It's clear that Miller had the trait and the one trait alone because of the testing done by the Mayo Clinic and because of his spleen, which was intact at the time of his death. Sickle cell disease frequently causes damage to the spleen. And so we have asked for third-party assessment on this, and the county is saying, we can't because we're in a current case with his family. And that is just bogus. And I want to shout out United Fort Worth and Pamela Young and everyone who's trying to get us to leadership that we demand answers to what happened to Mr. Miller. And this is just a very sketchy situation. What is your take on reading this?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things to where trying to honor the family, also, maintain the integrity of the process forward, to say one thing, to try to create a sense of not needing to be accountable to a higher level, obviously is a deflection tool. One of the things I was reading, with one of the Fort Worth reports was that they actually attribute it to the possible use of pepper spray multiple times in close range, So if that's the case, then obviously, that's not something that wants to get discussed in a public forum, in a public context. And so the sickle cell aspect, seems to be a little bit more hands off, less responsible, and like anything else, it's one of those things to where does sickle cell become relevant in the conversation? Of course it does, but not any more than the fact that there's the potential that you were pepper sprayed at close range multiple times over and over again, right? Which is obviously an indication of negligence and abuse of power, So, that's where, we really have to have the checks and balances in place. And if we don't have an opportunity to have this knowledge publicly to call for action for review, then, it's a situation to where we're going to continue to have citizens lose, whether it be life or, just further be damaged, physically, mentally. We have a responsibility to take care of everyone in this community, not just those that are walking out in public, but those that we serve even in their time of, being accountable to their actions. They're still humans and they deserve the best.
Yeah. And as we know, if you listen to the pod, like this is a Tarrant County issue. Our jail system is one of the highest county jail systems where deaths are happening in our prison pipeline. And so this is not just a one-off, but it also gets me back to the Pamela Young interview where she talked about like the people who are supposed to keep the police accountable are the same people who get funded by the police. So this is why it's a broken system. And we have to look at how do we do justice for his family and then also keep our county officials accountable for this. And really, I would genuinely read the story if I was you. It's going to be in the description. And kudos to someone I would love to get on the pod, Elisa Simmons, one of our new judges, in a statement Tuesday evening, said that she doesn't think Miller's died from sickle cell crisis alone. And there had to be some sort of triggering, she wrote. Quote, something out of the ordinary occurred which caused the crisis and facilitated the death. In Mr. Miller's case, what was the precipitating factor, ? Until and unless we are able to answer that question, we cannot claim his death to be a natural occurrence. So then you get the next commissioner, Gary Fix, sarcastically say, oh, I didn't know Elisa Simmons had a medical degree. Manny Ramirez said that we can't release more information because it's under pending litigation. And then Commissioner Roy Charles Brooks, who's 1 foot out the door, didn't return a phone call or have provided any comment. And I'm disappointed in that because Glenn Whitley shows when you're 1 foot out the door, you get crazier and you say more stuff you feel. But Roy's doing the opposite.
And you said something earlier that, I want to touch on, the idea that it's not a one-off, right? So there's data from the Texas Attorney General's office that shows that at least 52 people have died in Tarrant County jails since 2017 when they were in custody. And an alleged mistreatment and negligent, being, contributing factors to that. So again, right, there's obviously some numbers, some patterns, and when I say patterns, let me pull that back. Maybe there's some trends would be the better word. If you have 52 people that have died from possible mistreatment and neglect, then obviously something needs to happen to understand where those numbers are coming from and identify those root causes so the root causes could be addressed.
Yeah, 100%. Also, there is I believe, when I go back and do our edits and upload the description, I think the United Fort Worth or somebody has a kind of campaign going on that you can sign up and advocate that you believe that in this situation. I'm going to put that in the description so you can sign your own name to it.
Yeah, I think specifically Fort Worth's Broadway Baptist Church, alongside an activist group, Eyesight of Tarrant and United Fort Worth, like you said, are the ones that are gathering the signatures, for the letter. When an interesting thing is that you have the students and faculty from Texas A&M University School of Law, their civil rights clinic, that are supporting and helping put in this effort together.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep you guys updated on that show. I would love to have Elisa Simmons on the pod to talk more about her concerns, especially as this is, since 2019, moving at an unappreciative pace. But so we'll have a lot more time, I'm assuming, to talk about this. We're going to move to the third story. All right, so the third story is kind of another state story. I thought this was important because it's a topic that we don't address, and I feel oftentimes, like, EJ, you talk about economics, you talk about business all the time, talk about other things. I want you to know this pod is about gun control. We talked about criminal justice, and now we're talking about refugee services. So Refugee Services of Texas, one of the main refugee resettlement agencies in the state, is facing a major budget crisis, forcing it to close 2 offices, cut staff, and pause new refugee arrivals. In a statement released Wednesday morning, the agency said it has resettled a record number of 4,700 refugees in the past 18 months, a lot more than originally projected, which at the end of the day, depleted financial reserves. There was a quote by the spokesperson, Chris Kelly, a part of the organization. It is a 45-year-old agency, and with an operating budget of $37 million. This agency is no longer taking on new refugees simply because of costs. Yes, they're going to continue to support the cases that they have, but they are closing 2 offices, cutting its entire staff by 45% from 241 employees of April 30th to 134, considering furloughing some of its remaining staff. They have offices in Fort Worth, and in Dallas, pausing new refugee arrivals for 120 days, and are on the search of raising $4 million. And so, I think this is a county thing, but obviously our county leadership probably don't value refugees. We know how they feel about immigrants. So I, at minimum, feel like this is another kind of story that should be in the top of mind of all of us. What is your take seeing the situation here? Obviously they're doing good work, but now it doesn't seem like they're getting the support. Let me give you an example how frustrated I am. I just talked to you off the pod that the American Rescue Plan, we're giving $6 million additional dollars to visit Fort Worth.
Right. And that's that situation. You got money to give that money to visit Fort Worth so they can celebrate and try to bring in, people for the cowboy culture, which is great and all. But, we're going to honor it, but we're bigger than that, Yeah. Yes, and so it's a situation to where, our refugees, it's, I'm going to give you a quick kind of context of this. When you're in the classroom, everybody's watching how you treat everybody as an educator. And the students will watch how you treat what could be maybe a challenge in the classroom, and how you handle that, and how you respect them, how you keep them dignified. And if you don't do right by that student, even your best students are not going to respect and honor who you are as an educator. So on a scale factor, how we treat the refugees when they come to our city and what we do for them, everybody else is going to recognize that, and it's going to speak volumes about who we are as, the city of Fort Worth, and with the growth and everything. And so if we want to be a leader on a national level, we need to lead in all aspects of, how we build our community.
Hey, I think you said it well, and I think we should leave it there. And I realized that we never actually told people what the big story was this week, today. We actually have our first in-person interview. Actually, no, Pamela Young was our first. Let me hold that back. Our second in-person interview. Our first time a guest co-host is in person interviewing someone. Today, for the big episode, we talk with President and CEO of United Way of Tarrant County, Leah King. What we are here to discuss with Leah King, she is responsible of the leadership and vision of United Way of Tarrant County. They are celebrating their 100th year supporting the county. They service over 550,000 people with different resources across the county, and also distribute and invest tens of millions of dollars to the county. And Leah has been the CEO of United Way Tarrant County since November 29. And today we have her here with us to talk about the future of United Way, but then also to talk about how our priorities shifting as they get ready for the next centennial. So join me all in welcoming Leah King.
Wow, Fort Worth story starts 30 years ago. So grew up military, moved here back in the mid 90s, came here a little earlier than that for a business trip, fell in love and sent a postcard home to my mother and said, I'm going to live here someday. And here I am. So
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a great place for me to live. And because I had the chance to live so many places, but never had the chance to decide for myself where I lived, when I got here and I loved it, I was like, this is it.
Wow, that's awesome. So were you a Texas kid before this, or how'd you get?
No.
Where was home in the background there?
It's tough when you ask a military kid, right? That moves around.
I understand that.
So home is probably Philadelphia. Went to high school there. My family is there. But we lived in Texas, in El Paso. We were at Fort Bliss back in, I don't remember what year. Plus, I'm not going to tell you. But I was like 8. So Texas, to me, was like brown, dry, windstorms. Had no concept of what it was like here. So I think when I got here and I was like, I like the lifestyle. The people are incredibly nice. And I can afford to be single and live on my own. So that tells you how long ago that was, because things are a little bit different now, right? And I felt safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I connected pretty quickly to this neighborhood, to this community.
If you want to talk about like what is United Way Tarrant County and where are you guys today and what you're looking at in the future. I know you talk about being a part of the organization for a long time and seeing its growth, seeing the city grow. So we're just really excited to dive in and hear where you guys see the next 100 years of the organization.
Well, first, let me just even back up by saying thanks for having us on. And I love to be here to share about this organization. I've had the pleasure and the honor to serve as the CEO for about 3.5 years. I've been with the organization for 7. And to be leading it at the time that we are in our centennial celebration is really special. The organization has evolved so much over the years, as you would expect it to. So in a nutshell, what we try to do is just be responsive to the needs of the community. The way that we know what's happening and what the community's needs are is just through research. So we have this process that we call our eyes. So the first and the most important part is identify. So we have to identify what is happening within the community, and we do that through gathering research. So we work with usually some kind of institution of higher education. They go out to every zip code within the county. They do focus groups. They do one-on-one surveys. They gather census data. And then we have other data from call centers and things like that people call into. And so we put all that together. We develop a community assessment, and that data is what drives our work. So from there, we start to tell everybody about it, inform, right? So we tell everybody else, here are the issues, so that we're all investing together. And so identify, inform, invest. And then the next thing is invite. We invite people to get involved, serve on committees, boards, donate, like whatever way you can get involved. Let's do it. Let's do this together, because it really takes all of us in order to make major inroads to some of the challenges that we face as a community.
What are some priorities you guys are taking today as you look into the next centennial?
Mm-hmm.
What?
So let me I'll tell you 2 things. Number one, I'll tell you about our core programs, things that we will likely always have as an organization, but also a couple of things that are really important and pretty timely for what's happening in our community. So our core work is a couple of things. Number one, we have about a third of our organization that focuses on nothing but people 60 years of age and older. There are all kinds of challenges, and particularly during COVID, that was the most vulnerable population. They were like, stay in the house, don't come out. Well, we had to get them food. We had to make sure that they could still be seen by doctors, get them connected to online tools that they weren't accustomed to. Our team looks into social isolation because that impacts not just mental well-being, but it can advance cognitive deficiencies and dementia and Alzheimer's. So that is a core program that we have. Another one is one of my favorites called VITA. It's for households that earn $60,000 and less. We do your taxes for free, and like for free, not like that loan and then we take a percentage. It's for free, and we set up across the county probably about 8 to 12 locations, depends on the year. And you can come in and get your taxes prepared by volunteers who we work with the IRS, so they're IRS certified. It's all electronic, goes directly into the IRS, direct deposit back into your bank account. It's important because we're doing thousands of these each year. And so that means we're bringing back millions of dollars in tax refund money to Tarrant County, which we know people are going to spend here. So that's a really, really important program. Another one is military and veterans programs that we focus on those families. So anybody who is active duty military or a veteran or their family members can call in for everything from having trouble meeting my rent, or I want to find a basketball league that's only veterans. We can connect them with all of that. So those are some of the core programs that we have. And so the new things that we do, I think this is going to resonate with so many people who listen because they understand what's happening in our community. But I don't know that people know this, at how poorly we are in terms of infant mortality. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the state. And actually, in one of our local zip codes, it's the second highest infant mortality rate for Black women, infant and maternal mortality rate through the state. And that's not good, right? Like, we have information, resources, money to be able to help people to have a healthy pregnancy. And so ultimately they're able to have healthy children. So that is something that we are just going and shouting from the rooftops, literally everywhere I can speak publicly. I want to be sure that our community is aware of that because we have to do better there. The other thing is on youth gun violence. And we know that that is something that's happening far too often. And our kids are scared and they're sick of it. And frankly, we as a society need to get to the point where they are. They're going to lead the way here. We're going to bring resources and information and a lot of community-based organizations together that are working on violence intervention and prevention to help. Let's surround these kids with what they need to succeed and thrive and feel safe. And whether that is investing in them or their family members or both, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. How are you processing? We talked about this earlier on the pod, you know, what happened at Allen Outlet and just like, you know, seeing your work evolve. Like, do you see these two new projects becoming a core like the other four you mentioned? Or do you see this as, you know, now you're into that second centennial? What's your thoughts there?
Well, it's going to have to be core because it didn't get broken overnight and it's going to take a while. And what I'm encouraged about is that there are a lot of organizations and people who are also speaking about it. And so the more of us that are working on it together, the greater impact that we can have sooner. But the reality is that this is going to take years. You know, if you look at where we are from a gun violence perspective today versus where we were even 10 years ago, it happened, but the frequency that it's happening today is out of this world, and the severity. And so, you know, we certainly can look to the pandemic and some of the excruciating mental health challenges that many people faced, and they have gone untreated. And the common thing that you find with people that really get involved in mass shootings is loneliness. You know, they don't feel seen or heard. Nobody cares about them. And when you think about kids that get involved in gangs or anything like that, generally it's because they're looking for connection and love and support. We can do that in a healthy way and in a way that provides peace in our society and not fear in our society.
How, you know, me even just being curious, you are aware that how our podcast kind of operates, and how do you feel navigating the politics side of Texas and stuff that you do, you know, because there's always a left side, a right side.
That's right.
And you're trying to navigate change in all that. What's your experience there or thoughts? I know a lot of people who listen to this pod, heck, even myself, running a pod that feels like it has traction and needs to represent something, and it might piss some people off, or it might make some people more pro the pod. How do you navigate that?
Well, with data.
Yeah.
Right. If you let's look at the number of babies that die, the number of moms that die. The research from the state demonstrates that 50 to 80% of those reasons are preventable. Mm-hmm. That's not a red or a blue or a black or white or whatever. That's just facts. Right. So why is that? Well, many don't have access to health care. If we increased access to health care, then we can ensure that mothers have the information and knowledge and support to deliver healthy babies. The same thing with guns, right? Like, we can't get caught up in the gun control and all of that. What we can get caught up in is making sure that there's a viable alternative to weapons, because the reality is that we have more weapons on our street than population in the entire country. So the weapons are there. But if we help people see that there's a better way to get out whatever is inside of them, that's our role. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't share those facts and that data with our elected officials. I just shot off multiple emails today to our state senators urging them to move House Bill 12 out and get it out of the holding pattern. Really, we need it voted on. We need it acted upon. This legislation has bipartisan support, and there's no reason that it's not moving forward. And so sometimes they need to recognize that we're listening, we're watching, we're hopeful, we are grateful for the time and the service that they have, but we need this done. We need our mothers and our children healthy. And I'm confident that when people hear this, they'll reach out as well and understand that civic engagement, whether it's voting, and we need to talk about that because we'll talk about that. But also reaching out and letting your elected leaders know we need them. But they need to hear from us to know what our expectations are. And until we tell them what the expectations are and they know that we're watching, things can sit and linger like this bill that would literally save lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's awareness piece, right? And I appreciate you bringing awareness to, the infant mortality piece, where we are, the unfortunate numbers that, our community represents, and the need for that. I've heard you speak to the idea of being more kind of like an intervention piece, and as well as that prevention is relevant, right? But, long-term, sustainable paths forward. And, with our youth, looking for a place in our society and having a sense of dignity, right? And having a sense of belonging and having a sense that their voice is going to be heard for the change that they're seeking, is important. And so it sounds to me like there's some alignment and I shouldn't say some alignment, quite a bit of alignment.
What is y'all's take on, I know we briefly talked about it, but the students also attempting, to advocate for gun control, or the, protesting at past school and possibly other schools. I don't know what the data or the news story shows. What is y'all's takes on, as an educator and, someone who's just sent out emails about it? Like, what's your take on seeing the youth of Tarrant County act on it?
It's interesting because if you think back, even back during civil rights, like the only time that things really got focused on was when a large group of people did something that everybody, don't do that, and they did it anyway, right? So that tells you how strongly they feel about it and how sick they are. And one of the things that I read just before I came in was literally what they're saying: we're sick of it and something has to be done. And so I applaud the young people that take action into their own hands. I know it's controversial to walk out of school. I know the school system would have preferred that they handled it a different way, but I also understand the frustration and the fear when you literally are afraid to go to school every day. That should not be. And as a community, as a society, we have to do better. So I get it. It's easy to sit here as an adult and say, don't do that. But I can't say that I wouldn't have done the same thing, if I was in their shoes. It's just hard to sit by and not get involved. And I don't see any other way that is really inviting young people people to the table to say, we need to hear from you. You guys help us with what some of the solutions should be.
Yeah. And it's an ironic piece that you speak to, right? The idea of our youth wanting a voice, and I understand as, a publicly funded entity, organization, the responsibility to maintain safety. I spoke to that a little bit earlier. However, the students and the youth wanting a voice, if you take that away from them, that is only tempering, and creating frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I would imagine if there was some research done, that's probably a common thread for those who are carrying out these acts that are, just really unmentionable, a place where they feel like they don't have a voice, that they don't have a place in society, so, it's really important to, let everybody have their entry point and honor that entry point. And quickly, it's a situation to where we're never going to be congruent. Right. Nothing is ever going to be exactly the same. Alignment, yes. Congruent, no. But having that sense of tolerance, so then that way everybody can feel respected and have that dignity. Because without dignity, you don't feel like you belong. And when you don't feel like you belong, you'll take action to get the attention you want. And that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, sometimes the behaviors are not positive behaviors, right? And so the program that we have is called the 1 Second Collaborative, and it's really focused on youth gun violence, and it does and will involve young people because they are the ones that need to be driving the conversation and the solutions. Many of them, if you look at the ones that are in schools right now, they've grown up with this being how it is their entire life, and they have these drills, and it's just unimaginable to me. I mean, my son has long been out of school, but I have a grandson who goes to preschool, and there's nothing to say that it can't happen there because sadly we've seen it can happen anywhere. And so we have to listen. We have to learn from young people because they can tell us, well, here's where you're going to find those kids that feel alone. Here's who they are if they also had the opportunity to be involved. And so we've got to get them engaged in the conversation and in the solutions.
Because when we were coming up, access to information wasn't as vast as it is today. So the way information, whether it's positive, negative, anything, just travels so quickly. Mm-hmm. And so, again, it's a very unique time with access to information. It's a beautiful thing, and many times, however, sometimes it does create its challenges when, it's not managed in a responsible manner.
That's right.
And a scary thing too with the access to information, going viral is now the new gold. So everyone is seeing that this is. I mean, the amount of people, if you say, would you rather want $1 million or 1 million followers? There's a lot of Gen Zers would think about that conversation of which one they would want.
They would take those followers, right?
Yeah. So it's just like attention is the new gold for this generation. I want to go ahead and dive into. You guys impact over 500,000 Tarrant County residents. You guys distribute, invest tens of millions of dollars. I know there's probably grassroots organizations, nonprofits, people who are, wow, you got Tarrant on, United Way. Like this is, I would love to know, what is your advice to people who are interested in working with you? And, what's the experience you've seen of successful grassroots organizations end up thriving in Fort Worth?
So there are so many different ways to get involved with us. What I would tell people to do first and foremost is go to getunitedtarrant.org, and that takes you directly to our website. And on there, you can sign up for a number of things. You can sign up to volunteer directly. You can sign up to get information about resources that become available. So several times a year, we open up RFP, so requests for proposals, for organizations of all sizes they have to serve Tarrant County residents. And if they do that, we give some guidelines. So typically what we are looking for are organizations that are supporting people that find access to housing or affordable housing. Maybe they're tackling the homelessness issue. Perhaps they're in education or healthcare, transportation. So we'll give guidelines on the types of proposals that we're looking for. And from there, we will provide the full timeline, when it's due, what you have to submit, how to get information and questions answered. We typically also host what we call a bidders conference, and those are mandatory. And we do those so that people can come get their questions answered in advance before they start pouring their heart and soul into working on this application, only to find out maybe at the end, like, oh my goodness, we don't qualify. But if you have a 501c3, and even some organizations that don't, but they're in the process of getting their 501c3, for the most part, you're going to be eligible. We don't really do a lot with the arts. There are organizations that focus on that, so we support them, but we don't typically put out RFPs for the arts. We have things that are focused on women and children. We have things that are focused on nearly every social determinant of health. Basically, what does it take to survive and be healthy and safe and feel like your family's thriving? Those are the types of things. And getunitedtarrant.org is where all that information can be found.
I also am aware, and I would not be doing your communication team service if I did not acknowledge that you guys are celebrating 100 years of active service. What does that mean? And how does that transition to this second century campaign that you guys are facilitating?
So it's incredible to think that this organization is 100 years old, 1922. So multiple wars, so distributing flour and war bonds. And I mean, there's all kinds of things that the organization did in the beginning. What I love is that it's always been whatever this community needed, right? So at that time, it was about food and having ability just to have sustenance for families. So, distributing flour was a big thing for families to be able to cook and have meals for their families. Fast forward to today, and we talked about, some of the issues and challenges that we are seeing within our community. And so our role is always to be as responsive as possible, but also as important is to ensure that the information and knowledge that we get, that we share that broadly. It's crucial that our elected leaders know what's happening, and so we share this with all of them on a regular basis. It's important that our philanthropy community knows, so people that run foundations, they need to know, and it's great because we have regular dialogue, and they'll call us and ask us, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What do you think about this? So we have to be a trusted advisor, and we can only do that by getting credible data, and that data has to be real and available and free. And so the other thing is to be, a good partner with nonprofit organizations. And so that's what we do as well. So we work with them of all sizes. I mean, some of them are far bigger than we are, and some are smaller than maybe what even one of our programs might be. But that's great because our job is to help them get better, increase their capacity so that ultimately they can serve more people. We know that not everybody here in our community has the ability to take care of themselves the way they would like. And so the more that we can do to bring people access to those resources, the better for all of us.
Yeah. What are, I feel like our podcast is, 500 to 1,000 weekly listeners who obviously care. What would you like to maybe see from us to support what you guys are doing?
So a couple things. Number one, I would say put a challenge out to your listeners and find out what percentage of them are registered to vote in that vote, right? That has nothing to do with our organization, but I'm just super passionate about it and I get really angry.
What's your take on the results? County was under 9%?
It really makes me mad. I mean, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the leadership that we have, can have, should have, whatever, we drive that.
Yeah.
And if we're just sitting on our butts, not participating, that's a problem. And that means that a very small group of people make all the decisions for us. Think about it. Judges you have to vote on, right? Not just your city council members. So if you get caught up, right, and there's a judge that doesn't like you because of how you look or where you come from or whatever, that's crazy. Well, voting can impact that, right? So again, I'm going to come off that soapbox, but I would challenge you to ask your listeners not only how many are registered, because we got a lot of registered people,
Yeah.
they don't do anything about it,
Yeah.
right? And you can vote daytime, nighttime, weekend time. Like there's no excuse for it. And you can vote at any place, right, in the county. But the way to get involved and to really help us at United Way is stay in touch with us to understand what we're doing. Because I think a lot of times when you get to be 100 years old, you think you know, and it's like, oh, I've heard of it. I don't know what they do. Right. So stay in touch with us, and you can do that in a number of ways. We're on all the socials. I'm out and about in the community all the time. I go out and speak to neighborhoods, churches, like whatever. Right. So invite us out, participate as a volunteer. Certainly feel free to be a donor. Get involved in some of our committees, on our boards. There are so many ways, and not just us. Our nonprofit community deserves people who care and that want to give back to our communities. And there's a lot of ways to do that. So whatever their passion is, we got something for them.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to get your assessment on, our pod. I would say leans progressive, a progressive pod. As a historical nonprofit, do you feel that your boards are 50-50? Like, what do you feel like, the usefulness voice is oftentimes more progressive. Like, do you feel that's something that you guys are doing good at? Or do you feel like, because I'm genuinely saying, like, we have passionate, ambitious progressives oftentimes listening to this pod who might say, oh, United Way is a part of the establishment, and why would I bother to mess with that energy and go there? Like, so what would, I could navigate that for me.
I love that because, so it's something that I see and hear not regularly, but enough.
Yeah.
And what I would say, how United Way probably got that reputation is that for, probably 90 years, 95 years, the way that the money was allocated to the community was virtually the same. And not only was it the same, oftentimes it was the same organizations. So you had a whole group of nonprofits that were like, I'm not bothering with them. Like, they don't care. They're not trying to get in. They just say that.
Yeah.
Right. And so so there are several things that have to happen. You have to make sure that your staff is reflective of our community and that they're engaged and they hear and listen. We have to get community members actively involved, not just at the board level, but really like coming in and meeting with our team members. We have to be sure that we are out and about listening, not talking, right? Listening and learning. And then we had to change how we allocate resources, and we did that. So I'm very proud of the organizations that that we support now that probably 5 years ago wouldn't have even been eligible to apply for funding. And that's different. And we have a separate pot of money, if you will, specifically for organizations, nonprofit organizations that have annual revenues of $300,000 and less. So that's small, right, in the nonprofit world, and some of them have annual budgets of $100,000 and less, or $50,000 and less. Some of them don't even have their 501c3, right? Yeah. So we help them figure out how to get all that. So I hear you, and they're right, but it's different, and give us a shot.
Yeah. No, I love that, and again, I thank you for being on the pod. And we're gonna have all that in the descriptions, every link you kind of shared, ways they could follow. Any last minute things that you would like to share that we did not touch?
Yeah, the thing that I would just ask people to leave this conversation with is to know that every single one of us has the opportunity to make an impact. And you can do it alone, or you can do it with a group, whatever floats your boat. And we can facilitate both. So if you're like, I just want to go out, mentor a young boy, hang out, we can help connect you with an organization that will allow you to do that. If you're like, I just want to show up once a quarter, and whatever the case is, we can help with that. And so if you want to get involved in a community and you don't know where or how to get started, let us know, and we are happy to get you connected, whether it's with our organization or something else. We have deep, broad reach throughout the county, and people are eager to have, especially young people, come in and help them do better.
I think a big discussion is the Fort Worth way. And, I think about those little organizations who have a lot of potential, who could be upset or, and I try to do a good job of being my true honest self on this pod. I think authenticity is often the hardest part to navigate in a nice town because everyone wants to be nice with each other. But then also just having people who would be the establishment, right? Maddie's been on the pod. Crane's been on the pod. Zeta's been on the pod. We've had the establishment on the pod. How would you maybe humanize the establishment? Because the success of United Way wouldn't get there without the work. And it's just, I always leave super nervous. Oh, Leah King's coming to this pod where we talk a lot of shade about a lot of stuff, but then, man, genuine, nice, really caring. Seems like someone I can go hang out with outside of this. What is your take of that part of Fort Worth right now?
Oh yeah, it's so funny because your listeners are gonna be like, wait, you had her on? She is the establishment. She's part of the problem and all. Yeah. So what I would say is this: we all have our style. Yeah. Right. And my style isn't necessarily I gotta get in your face and shout and scream and point fingers. There's a time and place for that, but that's not my style. That might be somebody else's style, right? For me, what I seek to do is to educate and impart change. And I have found the easier way to do that is not by going to people that I think their way of thinking isn't in line with what would help the community. And instead of saying to them, you're just an asshole. Mm-hmm. You're not even listening. You don't even care. Helping them come to that conclusion in a different way, still pointed words, but I have to approach it differently. Because at the end of the day, the donors that we have, the volunteers that we have, I don't know where many of them sit. I don't, right? Because they care about people. And so we can get down all day because that's why I'm here. That said, I won't sit here and tell you that there haven't been heated words at times amongst myself and others, but that's what we're here to do, right? But I'm not there to embarrass anybody. I want to have that conversation behind closed doors so we can roll up sleeves and get real with each other, because I need you to be educated about some things. So that's my style, right? And I would suspect that my board appreciates that, right? But at the same time, they get frustrated with me at times as well. When we were in the midst of the pandemic and we had Ahmaud Arbery and we had George Floyd and we had protests. I mean, I'm out there, Tatiana Jefferson. I mean, so me and my friend, we were out protesting and we were out. I wrote an op-ed that got picked up in all these places, unbeknownst to me. Fine. Did it make them a little nervous? Probably. But, sometimes you just got to say it. Yeah. And so to me, that question is a stylistic one. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I care less about an issue that is not moving quickly enough within this city. I just approach it differently. And the other thing I'll say about that is that when I got here 30 years ago, there was no Leah King leading the United Way of Tarrant County, right? There was a lady by the name of Viney Chandler, and she was the first African-American CEO of United Way of Tarrant County. And then a lot of years went by, and I'm just the second person. Think about that in 100 years, right? So How many female mayors have we had in our city? How many female county commissioners have we had? Leaders of our hospital districts and systems that are women. We have that now, and they're women of color, right? So change is happening. Is it slow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it need to be faster? Yeah. But I think the more of us that come together and to continue to push, the better for all of us. We all have a voice, and we all need to use our voice.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a perfect way to close, and I think we even elevated the pod even stronger. Be able to give people that kind of conversation, and be able to sit down with you and have it is awesome. And you're always welcome back on the 817 podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Well, Brian, that was Leah King. I mean, what was your take and thoughts of the conversation?
I'll tell you this. Authenticity is there. With her, her time here with us. Obviously, doing work at multiple levels. Talking about what they do to honor our older community and how we are supporting them and keeping them as a priority. But then also, the value of speaking to our youth needing to have a voice specific to the situation with the protest, and walking out. And then in addition to that, the idea of, them knowing that even the small nonprofits need support. I'll tell you what, I was glad to hear it because it was a question of mine that I was thinking. But the fact that they have that day where they bring in the bidders to come in and make sure that, those that are seeking and don't have the knowledge, in the grassroots and the small level, have an ability to really go in and have potential to get those dollars, because that's where, the work needs to be, grown.
Yeah. No, I appreciate, I appreciated her, one, coming onto the pod. She was aware of the style of pod that we are, where we oftentimes, complain about the establishment, and she was graceful. She handled all the questions. And I'm just really, hopefully, this is a continued relationship with her, with the pod, with our constituents who would, I would say a quarter or a third might say, oh, there's the establishment on the pod. And if I look at anyone who's quote unquote established on the pod, I end up liking them at the end of the interview always. And I think, one, it's because it's natural for humans to actually really care about each other in a positive way. Like 98% of the time we all get along on the same stuff. But at the same time, I think where, I would say millennials and later, so Gen X and boomers, we were taught to integrate into the establishment and learn how to talk. The assimilation is probably the negative word that connotates with what you become good. Like for someone myself who went to college, who grew up around, who attended a white fraternity, that was a lot of me assimilating to what it takes to succeed in America. And I think what's cool about Gen Zs, or even progressives who are maybe further left, is that they believe, and I advocate for, and I believe in, is that we shouldn't have to change who we are to fit and assimilate into worlds, and into the world that is existing of quote unquote the Fort Worth way. And I think it's important for the people like the 817 podcast, and then what Tarrant's United Way, Tarrant Way is trying to do, is how do we pivot ourselves to let people be them full selves, and we're that conduit and bridge for advocating for them, even if the donors don't understand, or the donors maybe see this person as edgy. I think there's an opportunity for some type of level of community organizing that plays as the mediator between allowing people to be their full self of what they stand for, but then being able to be the person who can talk the Fort Worth way, but advocate for those who shouldn't have to assimilate. That's, to me, I think, the golden opportunity in the Fort Worth way. And I think we're getting there with Leah. And obviously, kudos to her to taking all the questions and just being on the pod. And I mean, what she's been able to do in her career is just super inspiring. So
yeah. No, and I see it, right? And I think that's something. I don't know. We have wins and losses to come up on.
Yeah,
in a moment, but
we're way past time. Yes,
just a quick celebration is the pod itself, and what's happening here is, the idea of, I agree, like you should be able to walk in your authentic self. However, I feel also that it's important to have an entry point into understanding the way it used to operate, because if you don't know what it was, then how do you move it forward from where it was, So it's an understanding piece, right? It's like walk in, learn the game, but not lose yourself because you realize that you're there to take it somewhere different.
Yeah. And this is going to be weird to say. This might actually be one of my favorite podcasts. And it sounds like, Jimmy's not here. I don't want to be offended or anything, but this was a good podcast. I mean, and for those of you who are true listeners, you are a true listener if you still pass 60 minutes and you're still listening. Realize what we just did today. We had Leah King, CEO of United Way of Tarrant County. We have Brian Renteria, who I didn't know till a week ago, who was just a fan of the pod, who wanted to be a co-host. And so me believing in equity and access and giving everybody a chance to be a voice here, he comes on and never done the pod. And then first pod has to interview Leah and learn about me and our nuances. And so this was actually a really cool experiment for the 817 podcast as a whole. And so congrats there. And let's go ahead and move into wins and losses.
Awesome. So
we always start with the losses so we can end on a good note. So what is your
I love it. Right. So the idea of a loss, again, for me, I'm afraid that we've lost some trust of being out in the community. The idea of there being uncertainty when we walk out our door, when we walk with our families, we walk with our community to just go do some of the daily activities. It's definitely a concern that we've lost a little bit of that of comfort and that confidence of being out within the public. That is a true loss. And so there's many entry points into that piece, but I think we'll let everybody kind of have their own space on that one because I think it's something that does resonate without having to speak into detail.
Yeah. Well, I got two losses that I'm going to speak into detail, and that is Fort Worth Bar hosted an all ages approved drag show. Now that's not the loss. The loss is that the Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare is investigating it, and basically in some matter said that this is hurting the innocence of our children. And you know what is crazy about people who just attended that drag show? They're alive today. And going to what you just said, gun violence, Tim O'Hare, where have you been discussing what's actually hurting innocent children? And I want you to count that number of how many kids have been impacted by drag shows and then counted by the people who've been killed since 2017 by guns in Texas. So that's my loss. And my number two loss is just, in the professional bull riding, I think we're having the PBR national championship or national series or whatever. I think it's a couple long distance. It's the second time that Fort Worth has hosted it, and we have convinced them to move here from Las Vegas. All of that I think is good. But I think in that story in the Fort Worth report, I put in the description, $6 million of American Rescue Plan Act money goes to Visit Fort Worth.
Right.
And that is just a loss when I think about going back to, I said this with the refugee story, I'm going to advocate for the National Juneteenth Museum over and over again, and how I think that is a no-brainer investment. But there's several other things. The CARES plan that Jared Williams had that you said we didn't have money for. Visit Fort Worth does not need federal dollars to convince everyone that they're cowboys. And this, again, does not knock the work that they do. This just shows what do we prioritize. Let's move to our wins. What's your
wins? It's going to be something that maybe not a lot of you are familiar with. Ideally, some of you are. They do a great job. Academy 4. I want to celebrate Academy 4. I volunteered with them. And so knowing the work that they do, reinvesting back into education, working with fourth graders, fifth graders, bring community, members in. They have a lot of opportunity to grow still. They've had some really great growth and success. But I think, having an opportunity to, bring it to the attention of our listeners, and I say our listeners, listeners of the 817 podcast. And if you're looking for an entry point, it's very simple, not very, taxing on time or commitment. It's a good way to just, invest in our youth and let our youth know that they matter to us. So the work that they do at Academy 4, I may get in trouble because there's a couple of other organizations that they'll be like, why didn't you shout us out? So it's not picking one over the other. But I know they wrapped up today on some campuses. And so just wanted to, show them some love.
Love it. Hey, my win also goes to, I have 2 wins as well. I'm trying to be equitable on how I talk on this pod. I'm not going to just do 2 losses. I give you 2 wins.
There you go.
And so UT Arlington receives $12 million to bolster new energy program launching in the fall. That obviously energy is shifting, how we look at energy. I just saw that in the Netherlands, 4 out of every 5 new cars electric that is purchased. So the transitions and things are happening, and UT Arlington has just got a boost to look at new energy and facilitate courseworks on renewable energy, sustainable energy, and what that discussion looks like. Also, the other win is the Texas A&M Law School has jumped in ranking to, I believe, 26.
From 49.
Yep, from 49 to 26, right. The second most prestigious law school in the state. And hey, it's only been like 10 years since it became Texas A&M Law School when it was unranked. Now it's ranked. There was a quote in there saying this is the best thing that has happened to Fort Worth in 100 years. And to me, I'm still trying to wrap around how big this partnership could be. And when I think about Magnolia and Southside and how fast that turned into an ecosystem in Fort Worth.
Right.
When you talk about Texas A&M's campus on the south side of the city center, and then a giant island on the north side, this city is about to look really cool and really different really fast. And so kudos, and that's why I think the 817 podcast is also excited. And if you guys finished off here, you guys are amazing. I truly think this is one of our best shows if you're still here. And if you are, share with a friend, because we talked about a lot of good stuff today.
Oh, yeah.
Let's give Brian a big round of applause as he did his thing. I'm going to be real with y'all. He was the most prepared host I've ever had. He even gave... Did we give? We didn't even give it to her. We had a thank you card for Leah King you brought to give to her, and we didn't even give it to her. But that's how prepared you were. Hey, you did a great job. Thank you for coming on pod. Thank you for being a listener. Thank you for being committed in the inbox, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Do appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone. And, hopefully I did right as the first co-host coming out. And I know there's a lot of other great co-hosts coming. So I'm excited to continue listening and hear this continue.
Peace.
Swipe, dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow